Hi, I'm Finola. I'm a mom of twin boys, and they both have autism. What autism means to me is it's just like a typical full-time job, you know? It's like you have to be on it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's like a typical, just think of a typical full-time job, but with a little more hours, you know. How I knew they were autistic was they were born premature. So um after getting out of the hospital and stuff, they were growing. They were my first kids, so I didn't know what to look for or what to expect, but to me they were growing typical. Maybe there were signs, but I don't know if there were signs, but to me they were growing typical, as typical babies do. um when they were um one yeah, when they were 1 year old, that's when their dad and we got a little suspicious, because when we looked at other kids around them, they were doing nothing compared to what they were doing. So we were saying something is off, you know? Something is off with them. So they weren't, no eye contact. And the first thing though for us was the communication. There was no communication, no words at all. So um persons around us, like when we asked advice, persons around us used to say, oh, they're boys, you know, they normally do things late, so just watch them and see. But even though they were saying that, me, I was still a little suspicious about it, because I'm seeing that no man, something is off with them. They weren't presenting the same except for the communication, but something was off with them. So we said, okay, they turned 2 years now, and we were saying that from 1 to 2, no improvement. They were doing the same thing, nothing changed, nothing gained. So there was still no eye contact, still no communication, and they were just behaving the same as how they were at 1 year old. So that's when we decided, no man, something is off. We need to go get them checked out and stuff. All right. Um. So we had set an we had set an appointment. At the time we were in Jamaica, so we had to set an appointment up by UWE, because in Jamaica I think there are only two persons in the whole of Jamaica that has the qualifications to diagnose them. So the waiting process was long, everything was long about it, and just to get a it was like a preliminary diagnosis, and just to get that, we had to wait about a year to get that. It wasn't a definitive diagnosis. So during that period now, um we had gotten the opportunity to come overseas. So um that's when they actually got diagnosed, and this was, by that time they were 3 years old. So they got diagnosed by a neurologist. At the time it was during the pandemic, so we couldn't go into office and do anything, so we had to do all of this online. So they would ask me questions, what they're doing, what they're not doing, and that's how they got diagnosed with autism. And they were saying that it was like a mild type of autism, right? Presently we're in the United States, and the support that we get is, we get normally like respite. In here we call it respite. So it's like a service where uh it can go multiple ways, in which if you know somebody that you trust, they can come to your house and kind of like babysit them. But this person has, they have to have some sort of experience with special needs kids. So they would come by your house and stay with the kids, or until you might want to go and do something for the whole day, but the government would pay for it, or your health insurance would pay for it. Another way you can do respite is you have certain companies that you can take them to. They will take care of them for um how many hours you want free. They even let them stay overnight as well. So you can get that free time as a parent to do whatever you wish to do. Get some time for yourself and stuff like that. And another support that us as parents get, um, we get like, we normally have like parent support groups that parents that are going through the same things, um, they would have information on a certain thing, and we share ideas, stuff like that. And we talk what we're going through, share ideas, yeah, stuff like that. For self-care, uh well, as for me, my self-care, when they go off to respite, right, that's when I get a little self-care, or when they go off to school. My self-care is just being by myself, taking in just being taking in that quiet atmosphere, you know. That's my self-care. Well, for their dad, his self-care is basically the same. Um he likes the quiet time as well. So that's for him. And um my general experience as a parent, it has been a rough one. Since having special needs kids, it's even rougher, if that's a word. It's even tougher, you know, because it's like your mind have to be sharing for both kids, especially if they're in need at the same time. So it has been a rough journey. The experience has been, it has its good and bad times, you know. It has its time when you see them do something and you're like, wow, they've come so far. But another time they get into this mood where you're like, oh my God, I can't with this. And I'm like, Father God, why you give me this burden? Like when it's at a bad state, I'm like, Father God, why you give me this burden? That's how I am, you know. So it has its ups and downs. I'm assuming just like a typical kid will give you the ups and the downs, it's the same, but maybe times 10, you know. Finding out the diagnosis, it wasn't traumatic for me, or I can't speak for dad, but for me it wasn't traumatic. What it was because throughout the period when they were one, I was researching. So I had an idea, and based on the things that they were doing, I knew it was it. So it's like my mind was already conditioned, saying, you know, this is what they have. So when they got the diagnosis, my mind was already conditioned. So the diagnosis wasn't that traumatic for me. I did cry, but it wasn't that traumatic for me, you know, because I had that expectation going into the session when they were about to diagnose them and stuff. Um, mm, well, they for autistic children they can get violent sometimes. Um, they do get violent sometimes. Out with my boys, they're like, you know, every autistic kid, they they have different characteristics. So there's no two autistic children that present the same way. All of them have their different traits and stuff. So one of my boys, he's more on the quiet side, and the other one is more outgoing. So the one that is more outgoing, he shows more of a violent behavior than the one that's on the quiet side, you know. So for him, he does like self-injurious behaviors. So he will bite his arm, especially because the communication is not there that much. They can't communicate what they want. So he doesn't know how to express himself. So if he's upset, he doesn't know what to say. So he'll just bite his arm, or he will hit his head on the wall or something, because he can't get, he's trying to express himself, but he doesn't know how to, so he reacts in these type of ways. So they will get violent even in therapy. Sometimes when they want him to do a specific task, he'll attack them. Sometimes he'll bite them or something like that. So they can get violent. But for my son, what we do is he has to be on medication now to kind of give him that little calm this about him, and he doesn't have to be that outburst. It kind of calms him, you know. He still has his outburst, but it's not as frequent as before the medication. My recommendations for parents and caregivers with undiagnosed children, um, once you see something that is off with your kid, uh don't second guess yourself. It's better to know than not know, because the earlier you know, the better, because early intervention is important. The earlier you get them to start doing these therapies and stuff, the better it is for the child. um so if you have any um suspicions that, okay, my child, something is off with them, you need to talk to your child's pediatrician. um Sometimes the pediatrician, they tend to blow it off as well, like, no, they're just, it's just, you just need to give them some time. But if you within yourself know that something is off, you can demand a referral from your pediatrician, right? um so get them tested, you know, get them, even if they don't have it, it's better to know than not know at all. All right. For kids with autism, they tend to have a lot of sensory issues as well, because with them, as you know, it's a developmental disability. And with developmental disabilities, with typical children's, the things that their parents would take for granted, that's what the autistic um parents, we don't really take for granted. For example, um just just the kids wanting to be independent and wanting to do stuff for themselves, that's what a typical kid would do. But for autistic kids, you have to push them for them to actually do something for themselves. So with autism, it affects communication, the behavior, and the senses. So like smell, hearing, seeing, tasting, those type of senses. Sometimes they tend to have eating issues because they don't like a certain texture of a certain food. So it affects their senses, you know. With hearing, they're sensitive to noise. So the my son, that is the one that is more quiet, he doesn't like sounds. So you have to get him one of those headsets that helps to block out some of the unnecessary noise, and he'll function better. Right now, he has regressed, because before he would answer certain questions, but now he isn't, because he's at a point now where the his senses, like the sensory stuff, it's getting overbearing for him. So he's getting overstimulated most of the time. So the things he sees, it's affecting him. The things, too much noise, too much light, too much um the different textures of food, and those things, they affect how he does stuff, you know. So he's kind of regressing now, but we're working on him. But they do tend to get sensitive to different things. And for communication, it is very important for communication, because with communication, everything else can be addressed. So the behaviors can be addressed with communication. The sensory things can be affected. Now, my son, on the other hand, the one that is more outgoing, he loves to chew on stuff. So he has a sensory thing where he loves to chew on different textures. So we have to get like sensory toys to kind of help him, you know. But um, that's it.